Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Well, good morning. This is Stan coming to you from Gainesville, Florida. And today we have another great guest on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. Welcome, everyone, to episode 296, and we all survived Las Vegas. Steve didn't survive it. He was surviving in Tex. And, you know, we have a special guest today, and he was in Las Vegas, too. That's Ethan Steimel.
Oh, he's the guy from, I know where he's from.
Money-making.
No, Artistic Finance.
Oh, right, Artistic Finance, right. The great podcast. We were all on it. We were all guests on it. And Ethan is here today. And where are you coming from, Ethan? Where are you recording from? New York?
I'm recording from New York City, yes, Manhattan.
New York City. You notice he said city. That's not Brooklyn. He's in New York City.
Well, he specified Manhattan. It wasn't Bronx. It wasn't Queens. It was Manhattan.
62nd and 1st, specifically.
Oh, you're right over that Starbucks on the corner.
Okay. Exactly.
Hey, Ethan.
All right, well, thanks for having me.
It's about time we had you. God. You know, I mean, we have so much to talk about.
Well, we had to negotiate with the lawyers and your agent. It wasn't so easy. Snoot wasn't so sure. Snoot was not so sure.
No, she was not happy about this arrangement, but I think everything's worked out now. So there you go.
You know, what I heard was Snoot was kind of checking Ethan out as he was walking down the aisleway. It was like, you know, she's always happy to see him, but she loves to watch him walk away.
I had no idea about Snoot.
I don't know what he's talking about.
I don't either. I thought Snoot had it for Stan, but that's a whole nother story.
That's a whole nother chapter.
There's love and hate there. It's like really weird, toxic kind of combination. But anyway, let's get on with this because we have so much to talk about.
It's conflict, baby. It's what makes for drama.
Yes. Stan, please tell our listeners a little bit about Ethan.
If you insist. Okay, everyone. So Ethan has designed lights for the Share Show at the Gateway Playhouse, Masters of Illusion Live, United States and Canadian Tour, La Boheme for the El Paso Opera, The Baker's Wife on Theater Row, and 10 or more productions at Forestburg Playhouse, including Kinky Boots and The Graduate. As a lighting director, his work includes CNN, Bloomberg, and Broadway HD. He is the associate designer for the current off-Broadway revival of Fiddler on the Roof and in Yiddish, my goodness, and The Art of Killing It, an immersive BIPOC murder mystery in Brooklyn, my home borough. Ethan co-produced Broadway's A Christmas Carol and hosts Artistic Finance, which you all should listen to, the weekly podcast for those in the live events industry who need to learn about finance. And who doesn't? Okay.
Especially us. I mean,
right.
Theater people, we know nothing about money. It's really pathetic.
We know nothing?
Nothing about money. I mean, we're these creative types, and all we can do is...
That's not true. I've learned.
Yeah, the hard way
I've learned from Ethan, too.
Yeah, well, I do. I listen to the Ethan show all the time, and it's really good, and we highly recommend it. So, Ethan... Before we get started, I think we should have an open question because we were all in Las Vegas last weekend doing LDI. Steve wasn't. We missed you, Steve. Steve, you were sorely missed. You would have had a blast. I mean, we had a show that was awesome. And
it was weird without you.
It was very odd.
I'm going to be there next year, and I've talked to my wife about this. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and go to Vegas, and I'm going to buy drinks for everyone at the convention.
Everybody at the convention center.
Everybody.
Like the whole, like all 4,000 attendees?
Everybody. We'll just line up right out there at the water fountain, and we'll get going.
What are you serving? I was going to say, what are we serving?
You know, you got to use my technique, Steve. I told everybody who won a fez that if I saw them wearing the fez on the showroom floor, I'd buy them a drink. I never went back to the showroom floor.
Oh, I was going to say, I saw people wearing their fez.
They were on the floor wearing the fez?
Yeah, I saw people.
I have an LDI question for Ethan. What was the swag you gave away?
All right. So I knew this was a topic that you guys have discussed on this show, and I thought long and hard about what I was going to give away for swag. And what I did was I gave away nothing.
Well, that's a true businessman right there.
but I took that money and I bought a step and repeat. So I now have this $1,000 step and repeat that is my background. Makes me look really official. but nobody got any swag.
I just assumed you'd go down to Fidelity and grab all the free pins and hand them out.
Yeah, right.
I thought about it. And Ayrton actually sponsored Artistic Finance to go to LDI. And I said, hey, if you guys want to give me any swag, and they said, no, we're good. So,
The country of Turkey sponsored us. That's how we had the fezzes. Next year, it's going to be kilts, Light Talk kilts.
but truthfully, I actually just don't like, you guys have great swag. I now have a coffee mug. I have 2 shot glasses because I've attended your live episodes
Very
twice.
Yeah.
You still have a coffee mug? You obviously have not put it into the dishwasher.
We have a dishwasher, but I only hand wash. So it's really convenient for me for Light Talk. But, I just don't. The planet and all that is I just can't think of anything to give away that I would feel good about. So one day I'm going to think of some sort of bamboo straw or something.
There's got to be something that's biodegradable.
You need to give away money.
I thought about money, but that just seems a little ridiculous.
Hey, how about Monopoly money with Artistic Finance logo instead of the president?
But it's just that paper and ink I don't want to waste.
I have it. It's going to be at your next Artistic Finance. It's going to be open only to students. And they can all register. And the winner of the drawing gets a $50 Roth fund.
Savings bond.
That's actually a really good idea.
Actually, an I-bond. They should get a $50 I-bond.
Yeah, there you go. That's even better. You get 9% in, interest. But before we get into the money stuff, we got to talk a little bit about the swag because we had 6 Fez winners. And I just want to talk a little bit. I want to announce who they were. These were people who were at our show who put their questions into a stolen ice bucket from the Westgate Hotel. And then we randomly picked out the questions. And each person that we picked out, there were 6 questions we picked out. We just happened to have 6 Fezes. And each one of them won a Fez, which was fantastic. So I am going to now go down the list of the people who won Fezes. We had Sean Greger, who, by the way, had amazing tattoos. I don't know if you saw this guy's tats. It was awesome. I mean, he was a good-looking guy. That's all I could say. He was a very good-looking guy.
Is he as good-looking as Bobby Hale?
He's better looking than Bobby Hale. He's a young Bobby Hale. He's a very young Bobby Hale with tats. If you can kind of imagine that was Sean looking. He looks fantastic. And then we had our friend Philip Powers. He's actually amazing. Amazingly, he picked we picked his question.
He had a good question.
Yeah, he had a very good question and something we should talk about.
That's right.
Campbell Shaw, who, everybody's going after this kid to
Our
go to
youngest
school.
listener.
Yeah, well, everybody's like saying, you got to come to my school. You got to come to my school. It's like they're throwing
we narrowed
money
it down
at him.
to 3.
Okay.
We narrowed it down to 3.
There you go. Gary Archer, who identified himself later as my first assistant lighting designer when I was a first-year grad at SMU. He assisted me.
Wow.
And I totally forgot. Now, talk about serendipity. Jonathan Scully, who works at the Florida Grand Opera, which is where on the show I actually talk about this. That was my first professional job. And of course, Jason Lawshe. And he was the one who was there last year, actually asked the question, but he did not win the grand prize, which is the Light Talk host of the day. And he won it this year. And his question was, Stan, do you remember his question?
I do. How do I become a guest on Light Talk? And then he wins. He wins the Magic Fez.
It's unbelievable.
I mean, you can't plan that kind of thing.
No. It was total serendipitous. So, Ethan, you were there. What do you think of the show? Be cruel.
Be cruel. Yeah, beat us up.
No, whoa. All right. First off, your show was fantastic. So this is the second time I've seen it. You guys said you're in your 6th year, so I missed the first 4 of them. But all I got to say is I loved it. I was disappointed not to see Steve there, because I was like fangirling. I had my little Steve Woods like sign that I had above my head. And I was like, where is he? So that was a little embarrassing for me. And, and everybody has to ask a question. Well, you don't have to, but if you're a regular human being, you ask a question. And for the second year in a row, my question was not asked. So I'll be back again next year trying to get, I'm going to put a really big postcard in, and I might even take your little tip about writing it on the back of a $20 bill.
$20 bill.
Just to make sure it gets...
Yeah, we take bribes.
We were all looking for that question, but it never appeared, unfortunately.
But I just got to say
Where's the
that
money?
everybody in the room had a great time. Like, it was so good. And actually, my Gary Archer story is that Gary Archer is actually a Patreon patron of Artistic Finance.
Oh,
so
nice.
I was so happy to see
Good for him.
him get his question. I was like, oh my gosh, that's my guy too.
It was so amazing. And he's the nicest guy in the world. He's just a very nice... Oh, matter of fact, everyone was really nice there.
There was a lot of love in
Well,
the room.
you know, I was sitting next to Stan, and you can actually hear this on the recording, but I cut it out. When they opened the doors at 10 minutes before the show, the place flooded with people. It was standing room only. And Stan's sitting there and he's saying, I'm getting very nervous. I'm very nervous. I'm getting very nervous. And I said, Stan, you said that the very first time we did it, and
I
you
don't
were
remember
great.
saying that.
Oh my
Well,
God.
I haven't been in, you have to remember, I've been inculated in an incubator for the last 2.5 years. That was the largest crowd I've been in a room with in 2.5 years. And I was like, holy moly, people. I loved it, but I was nervous because it was like everybody's exhaling, and I did great.
Yeah,
I
you
did
did
my
great.
whole trip.
Yeah, you did great.
It was really good to be socialized.
I'm glad
again.
you guys stayed healthy.
I do want to say
did.
there was a question that was asked that was when to say no to a job.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you guys gave great answers, which was, it was basically like, don't say no or be very careful when you say no. And I just want to say that from a freelancer perspective, I want to give my opinion here. And my thought is say no that anytime it feels wrong. Even if you've committed, even if you've said yes, if there's something in your gut that's saying get out, back out, take a different opportunity, I think life is too short to sort of suffer through these, because some of these jobs that we do are months long. They're like quite long jobs. And if you're going to be stuck with miserable people or not enough pay, or you're going to be unhappy the whole time, I think get out, because I was raised to, stick things out, do the job. And I've done that. But in the past, there's one in particular that it was a 4-month job. And in the first week, I knew it was wrong, and I stuck it out for 4 months, and it was 4 miserable months. So I think, especially if you're freelancing and you have no other ties to you or no other job to rely on, I say get out, quickly.
Your time is the most precious resource you have.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we leave LDI, we do want to thank Ann McMills and Brackley Frere for joining us and
Yes,
and filling
absolutely.
in for Steve. They were great, and Ann was thrilled. I mean, she hasn't been on the show in years.
For a while,
and she
yeah,
was like, "Why am I not on the show anymore?" I said, "You're always welcome to come on, Ann. Just tell me
She
what you
got
want
busy.
to do."
She got busy for a while. She was really busy. Yeah, she's writing books. She's doing good stuff.
And I must say, we must thank Ellen for putting on a great show this year. And I just want to put that in
Absolutely.
there. It was
Yeah.
amazing.
LDI is back, and it's going to be back
LDI
even
is
bigger.
back, yeah.
That sounds like the perfect segue, because we now have Artistic Finance. Ethan, can you just jump in there and tell us what Artistic Finance is and maybe why you started it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Artistic Finance is a weekly show. So I grab a new person from the entertainment industry every week, and I just drill them with questions about finance. So it varies from me asking, how do you sustain your career? Do you pay an accountant? How do you invoice? All things like this, very personal finance, which is sort of, I'd say, my main focus is asking my peers and colleagues, how do you actually do this? And then we also, some of the interviews will focus on a specific topic. So I have one coming up with the CPA, and we talk all about retirement accounts for freelancers. And that's another specific thing is I certainly do talk, I've had all of you on the show, and you all have steady paychecks as professors. But I do focus a lot on freelancers and people who don't have another source of income and are, cobbling together gigs and gigs and gigs. So I do sort of focus that. And so some of the topics we talk about, taxes, et cetera, are really geared toward freelancers. And the reason I started it was because I've made some financial mistakes myself. And I think there were some that were easily avoidable, but I went ahead and listened to sort of like lighting designers I was working with, or, electricians, or just people that are in our community that I thought, oh, this person's been around for 30, 40 years. They know what they're talking about. And so I've sort of listened to them. And then later on, I found out, oh, wait, maybe that wasn't such a good thing. And just like silly example, but like receipts. Everybody always says, oh, save your receipts, save your receipts. So I did that faithfully. And I got to the first time I had to do my taxes, and I'm reading through all the rules, and there's all these receipts that I can't use, which is fine. I just throw them away, no sweat off my back. But it was like, oh, if I buy clothing, that doesn't count as a write-off. It only counts in a very specific situation if it has a logo or if it's only used at work and nothing else. And everything I own, I can wear multiple places. So I realized, well, okay, that's not a write-off, even though everybody and their mother says that it's a write-off. And then something else is that a lot of the advice is get an LLC, incorporate for liability protection, stuff like that. So I opened up an LLC. And granted, I did that because I was trying to get a job out in Long Island and I needed the LLC for that. But I didn't end up getting that job. But now that's been 10 years. So I've had this LLC for 10 years. But everything that I would use the LLC for, I could just do as a sole proprietor. I don't need that LLC. So it was things like that where I just sort of did things and I thought I was doing it right. I thought I had done the right research. But then it turned out that I had just listened to other people and then had these things that I didn't need to. So anyway, so that's why I started Artistic Finance. And then the other thing is that there's a lot of good financial people in the theater world, in the entertainment world. Like, and Steve, when you were on my show, you actually talked about this. You said there's a dirty little secret that we all pretend like we're not good with money. But the reality is a lot of us are good with money. And I'm very aware of this. And actually, you had somebody on your show, Luther Frank from Sovereign Candle Collective. And the way he talked about money on your show was really good. I mean, he's fairly young, like 30-ish, but his perspective on, wages and stuff like that is really good. So there's a lot of these people who are really good with money. And I thought, you know what? I need to talk to those people. Like I need to find out from them. And then the thing is that when I was younger, I had an uncle who just pulled me aside and he said, hey, do you have a Roth IRA? And at the time I had no idea what that was. And he just went on for like a half an hour little rant about what was important about a Roth IRA. And I didn't have any money at the time. I was in undergrad, but it stuck with me enough that I opened one up. I went and found out and I opened it up and I started automating $5 a week into this Roth IRA. And I wasn't investing anything because at the time it cost $5 if you actually wanted to purchase a stock. So I just let the money accumulate. And then when it got to $200, that's when I spent the $5 to purchase a stock. So that's something that when I got out of college and out of grad school, where I had this little bit of money, it was just a couple $1,000s, but it was because I had just started and automated by happenstance. Like I just happened to have an uncle who told me about that. And so that was a really good thing. And I thought, well, you know what? If there was a podcast, perhaps, where theater people, entertainment people, people who are historically maybe not good with money, but if they can hear other people talking about, oh, here's what I did that was good, here's what I did that was bad, some of these mistakes or good things could be accomplished by doing that. So that's why I started, because I just found it so important and I didn't have people in real life to talk to about it. And I thought, well, if I can talk about it and put it out in public, other people can listen without having to have the conversations themselves at the tech table, which is sometimes an awkward place to have these conversations, though I will say I have them at the tech table. And that's just how I roll.
It's a beautiful story, Ethan. As you're talking, I'm thinking the people who need to get good with money the most are the people who don't have a lot of it. And that's where you started, with not having a lot, and that every week, even a little bit. And I didn't start with a lot myself, and I better learn something about money because I don't have any. So how do I change that?
That's good motivation.
That's another reason I started it. Was you go online to the Steve and I talked about this on our episode, but Money Magazine. It's like, well, you open that up and it says, well, if you're a millionaire, this is what you do. And it's like there's this big void for theater people who start from nothing. This is one of the problems with theater is people can get into high paying careers or good jobs, but they tend not to start that way. So eventually they leave theater for a corporate thing or something like that. But it's not the reverse where they're starting with a lot of money and then they're learning how to deal with a little. It's like, no, from the very beginning, you don't have any. And so you sort of get scarcity mindset and you have all these issues. And there's not a lot of financial help for people who don't have a lot of money. Because the reality is, like, saving money is important. We all know that. Nobody's going to disagree with that. But when you start your career not making a lot of money, it's hard for you to save. And then it's a compounding embarrassment on yourself because you're embarrassed that you don't have a lot of money to save. So then you avoid the topic. And actually, my target audience, so I actually thought my target audience was students. I thought this is perfect for students. This is who needs to hear this. And I did a listener survey like 6 months ago, and not a single student listens to my show. But,
oh my God.
Yeah. But the people who do listen are the 30-year-olds, the 40-year-olds, these people.
Who are seeing the reality. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Who are saying, okay, I want to start a family. How do I, get organized with my finances? Or I've been doing this career for 10 years. I still don't have a lot of money. I don't have any savings. Like I have listeners who are in their close to 50s and they have no savings or very little savings. And that's a very scary position to be in. But it's a reality. So anyway, so those are the people who are listening are people who are like, okay, all right, it's time for me to figure this out because no one else is going to do it. And I haven't gotten my big Broadway show that pays residual income, so I really have to figure this out.
You haven't got it yet.
Haven't got it
You're
yet.
also talking about helping people start to build generational wealth.
Yeah, it's a hard thing, generational wealth, and also my talk at LDI last year, so 2021, was about multiple streams of income and the importance of that, because that's, even all of you are all professors, but you also freelance outside. So you all already automatically have multiple streams of income, but in today's day and age, it's so hard and to survive on just one stream. And then freelancers automatically already have multiple streams. So this is another complication of if you're freelancing already, you don't have, like, you may have one job that's always recurring every year, or 10 gigs that are always going to come back, but there's others that come and go. And so automatically it's hard to get regular financial advice because it's like we already have multiple streams. Like, we don't have time for a side hustle because the time is so intensive of what we're doing. And so the generational wealth is a hard pill to swallow because it's like you have to get very successful in your career in order to make money, in order to grow generational wealth, in order to grow a family. And it's just a tough one because there's the harsh financial realities that I've come up against with artistic finance. And there's tough conversations that there's just no way around, because it's like, if you're not making enough money, you have to do something different.
That was the next question I wanted to ask you. And that is, what effect did the pandemic have? I mean, I know that it stopped everything for a long time, but have we recovered yet? Are we on the road to recovery?
Yeah, well, this is a good one. And the thing about this is that financial recovery from pandemic for a lot of people is going to be it's compounding. So the same way that saving and investing compounds in a good way, the opposite is also true. Taking a year off, 2 years, 3 years of savings is going to have a negative impact for 10 years, 20 years of people's personal financial lives. And the people leaving the industry, I saw firsthand a lot of people leave the industry, and they're peers of mine, colleagues of mine, lighting designers who I've considered, they've done better gigs than me. They're more talented than me. They left the industry because it's just such a hard time. And when you're faced with 2 years of no work, and you don't know that at the time, but there's Broadway associates who have had Broadway associate careers for 20 years, and in pandemic, they had to do something else. And then that other thing is remote, maybe it's not the highest paying job in the world, but you know what? It pays just as much as theater for 1/3 of the work or less. So several people have left, and it is a little dismal. It's a little sad, but the reality is I have not seen a single person that pivoted out that has returned. Everybody stays out. And not because they're disappointed, not because they're whatever, they're actually really happy with what they're doing now. And so that's sort of like a bittersweet thing that I've seen is people are actually happier. Having your weekends is just a wild and crazy thing. And it's like, once you have your weekends, it's like, what am I, doing this for?
Especially if you have a family, if you have kids.
And even today, I just saw somebody posting on LinkedIn about how they toured before, and now touring is back and they can go back, but their children have left the house and they don't want to leave their spouse at home, alone so much. So they're hanging up their touring hat. They're saying never say never, but 30 years of it was good. But even now, even though it seems like we've recovered, priorities are different and things like that are different. So I'm still seeing people drop out.
Interesting. You stimulated a couple of thoughts, Ethan, listening to all of that. One about freelancing. In some ways, I still freelance, even though I'm working in construction. Architects and myself, we never know when it's going to dry up or when it's going to stop. It's the same sort of. So I try not to live. I don't make that income as part of the way I run my life. Like I don't spend more because I never know when that's sort of extra. But the other point, I did read a glimmer of hope today. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, and it was talking about after the 1918 pandemic, there were the Roaring Twenties, and now there's all this fear and self-fulfilling prophecy about a big recession that's coming, yet it hasn't materialized yet. So I'm talking about, are we coming back, which David is asking. And the people who left, who found a more balanced life, that's a good perspective to hear. But at the same time, I'm going to stay optimistic. David knows I try to do that, that we may see a boom. Because I think even reading today that the supply chain issues are clearing up, and that we may see, like after the 1918 flu pandemic, we might actually see a big spurt of growth and prosperity. And let's hope that trickle. If we have that, entertainment should also reap the benefits of it. So I'm just being optimistic.
Well, I think that's appropriate. I think you're spot on, because even for myself, since August of this year, I have just been working nonstop. And even before that, I was busy. But it was just like August, I ran out of time to do invoices. It's like, if there's one thing I'm going to do, it's going to be sending off my invoices. And
I hate doing that.
I like doing it because I know what it's going to return to me,
Right, but I want my partner to do that for me so I can do the design work.
But I have just been so busy, and here we are in end of November, beginning of December, and it's like there is still just work to be had. So I think right now we're in a bumper crop of work. This whole year has been, and I think it's going to continue into 2023. But I was just on Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish at New World Stages, and I will say there was a lot of young people there. So this was very hopeful, seeing all these young people there working. I'm 34. I was the oldest designer type in the room. The actual designers didn't show up into the room. Maybe I shouldn't say that in public, but it was the third remount of this version, and I was like the oldest one, and I was feeling old there. But the good thing about it was that there was all these young people that are here to sort of fill the gaps where other people have left the industry. So I think this is a big moment of turnover, and there's a lot of opportunity for young people. And I myself have been getting assistants reaching out to me on LinkedIn or however, asking if I have work for them, and I've been giving them work. So there's definitely this large group of young people that are willing to work now and are getting work and great opportunities.
Now, Ethan, you shot off some numbers about where, what the state of the regional theaters are in and things like that right now compared to before the pandemic. Do you want to just go over a few of those? I found them very interesting.
So actually, this was a study done by JCQ Arts Marketing, and this was, I think, a week ago. And they looked at the 2021-22 season of 15 professional arts organizations. So they chose 6 regional theaters, 4 music groups, 2 opera companies, 2 performing arts centers, and then a ballet company. And now, granted, the Omicron surge was in all these statistics, but it was just talking about recovery and numbers. And so subscriptions for these organizations is down 32% from pre-pandemic. And that's even with this bumper crop of work that I'm saying. It's like everybody's doing theater, everybody's doing stuff. And attendance at all these theaters is down 14%. And then revenue is, even though these numbers are down, revenue's only down 8%, but that's still 8%. And so if you have $1 million in income and you're down 8%, that's $900,000 instead of $1 million, which is quite a significant thing. And then the other interesting thing that they pointed out was that discount ticket buyers are down, which sort of means that you can only discount a ticket so much before you just run out of people who even want to attend the theater, because other people also, I think, want their theaters. But another thing is that all across the boards, these organizations are doing about 70% of the programming that they were doing. So they're all doing less shows, less things. And that has caused their income to go down. The income's about 60% of where it was globally over all of their, not just per performance, but over their entire organization. So recovery, I don't think has happened specifically in theater and entertainment. But that being said, from my actual personal perspective, I feel like jobs are coming back and things are coming back. So I don't know how to balance, how the people who have to balance the budgets and figure out all this. They're suffering from not as much income, not as much donors, things like that. But they're still putting out programming and they're still hiring, designers and technicians and all this to put on their show. But another thing is that the new audiences are down by 33%. So people that were coming to the theater for the first time or coming to these organizations for the first time or a one-off show are not coming as much. And here's even worse is the returning audience is actually down by 29%. So audiences are not coming. And I don't know if that's because of Omicron, because of unknown. I'm not sure why. But that's a reality. And all the shows I've done this year, out at Forestburg Playhouse and out at Gateway Playhouse, talking with the producers is they're still recovering from COVID. And I know at Forestburg, Franklin said that he's like, I'm feeling like I'm just now starting to get back to where I'm ready to program for next year and maybe have a profitable year. So I would say the recovery for these theaters, again, it's a long-term recovery, but they're still suffering in ticket sales and donations and everything. And that's even with the PPE and the government help.
Do you notice in the productions you're doing around the city, do you notice that the producers are pulling back on cast size, orchestra size? Are they simply downsizing the shows also to be able to afford to do it?
So here's an interesting thing. Just from all the shows I've been doing, I don't notice a difference. Like, yes, I noticed cast sizes are going smaller and things like that, and budgets are tight. But the reality is that's how it was before, and that's how it is now. So I actually, from my perspective, I don't see it. I do see, rentals are a little higher and stuff like that. But I don't see the producers necessarily trying to cut it more. I see them trying to figure out, okay, how do we pay for lumber costs that are higher or a lighting rental that's higher than it was previously? So I don't run the budgets. Other than lighting departments, when I need to rent something. So I personally have not seen it. And I think it's sort of like how theater was before is how it's going on now. And producers do the classic thing of, we don't have it in the budget until you have to have it in the budget. And then they figure out a way to make it happen.
Let me put you on the spot then. I mean, you were one of the producers of A Christmas Carol. How do you now put on your producer hat and answer that question, or did you just answer it?
I did, but it's also it's also rough because Christmas Carol is historically already a seasonal show. So in a way, we were best positioned because we had wrapped up the season when COVID hit, and yes, it did cause turmoil. And then of course we did bring a tour back when the Omicron surge hit. And if you've listened to the Artistic Finance podcast, my episode with Heather Shields, who's one of the bigger producers on Christmas Carol, she talked about the importance for theater globally that 10 days before Christmas is like a high time when people get their ticket sales in. And Omicron last year surged during that 10 days. And so many companies were hit financially so hard because the bulk of their ticket sales was that 10 days before Christmas, and they all lost out. So, and Christmas Carol was no different. So this year we didn't come back to Broadway. Like, our hope was to come back to Broadway every year. and COVID ruined that. And then Omicron was such a financial hit. And this is even with, I don't know the exact numbers, and it's probably legally not, I'm not allowed to say, but I know that Christmas Carol, the entity, got, $1 million or so from the government via the PPP and via programs like this. So even with that $1 million of help, they still had a terrible financial year last year that they're still recovering with. So, and we have plans for next year. So I don't know if I answered the question there, but
No, you did.
yeah.
I have a follow up. And maybe this is going to sound a little bit reductionist, but I wonder if you would speculate on whether this reductionist logic holds true, that our industry was the first to shut down when this thing came along, and people were saying we'd probably be the last to get back up again. But do you think that logic holds any water?
Absolutely. And this is just my observing my own work. And just all, like, I don't think how you could argue with that at all, because even now, like I just saw that a show was stopping because people had tested positive in the cast, recently. So I'm still seeing it. So, I would say we're still not recovered in the sense of any producer now, especially one worth their salt or working with equity or who has COVID rules and COVID procedures, has to face the reality that at any moment the show could shut down. And so still, in New York City, shows are still closing down. Like Broadway mostly has it figured out. Big stuff mostly has it figured out. But all the small things can get canceled, if a cast member tests positive. There's nobody else. There's no understudy.
How is Broadway handling the seating? Are they packing people in like they used to, or have they are?
100%. No mask requirements.
No, okay, because I just, one of our colleagues, a well-known lighting designer, posted just yesterday who's been working and owns a company, and that he's got it. But I also understand, and I just feel I feel safer than I felt in a long time after my travel, and I I can't wait to get back to my office and sit with my students and not be afraid to interact and just be smart about masking or not masking. But I'm just kind of just wondering about, now it's not so deadly, is it? It seems that from a deadly perspective, it's for people who are elderly or have other underlying conditions and such. Are we safer? Do you get the sense that we are safer as a society?
I don't feel safer at all. I feel the exact same before. When vaccines came out, then I felt safer. And I will say, once I got my vaccine, I was like running naked through the streets, super happy.
I thought I saw you.
Yeah, exactly. I made the news. the news.
He was good looking too.
Yeah, not bad. A few taps would help, but
I'll get those eventually. I get those. But I personally have sort of never been worried once vaccine came out, because that's just how I am. But I don't, you're crammed in there, you're packed in. I also did a show recently in Missouri, and I walked into the theater and I was like, what is this giant gap between rows? Like, because in theater or in New York, I forget that the seats are so close together and everybody is in
the Broadway houses,
And I went out, I was like, what is this?
It's like the back of a 747 in Coach, on Broadway
exactly.
theaters, right?
So I don't know what we were talking about, but I don't feel any safer, honestly. I think what it is the
you
vaccine.
were naked in the streets.
That's right. Naked.
I wasn't planning to talk about
It's funny
that
because I do feel
today.
I've had all the vaccines. At first, I didn't think they worked for me. Now they are working for me, and now I have the bivalent, so that should handle most of it. So I feel like I do feel safer. But then again, I was living in a bubble for 2.5 years. So I don't know maybe I'm being overly exuberant that I shouldn't feel as safe as I feel. I don't know.
Well, I will say I did get COVID, but I got it post-vaccine. And
so did I.
The only reason I even knew I had it was because I had to get tested for work.
Interesting. You had no symptoms. You were asymptomatic.
Well, no, I did have like a little bit of I thought it was allergies. Very, very minor allergies. Those aren't unusual for me. But I never would have known it was COVID except for that. Yeah. I will say, like, even pre-vaccine, as a freelancer, you have to take jobs or not, but you have to. And I remember people constantly were saying, oh, I'm too afraid to fly. I'm too afraid to take the subway. I'm too all this. And I would just sort of sit there in my brain because it's like, well, I had to get to work. And how else was I going to get to work by taking the subway? And same thing for flying. It's like, well, I had to fly for work. And so I guess because of that, I've never been afraid. because it's like, well, what's going to be is going to be, you know, not to be fatalistic like that, but it's like I need to get from point A to point B, and I have to get on a subway with people.
What did you do? Did you save any money, or did you have to dip into savings throughout the COVID as a freelancer?
Yes. Both. Everything.
Yeah, both.
I mean, I think I hit it the same as everybody else hit it. You know, I was on unemployment. I got the PPE that was a minimal for me. And then, yes, I used savings. But, you know, the thing is, I did have savings. I have a spouse, and she works, and she never stopped working. So we at least knew that, you know, half of the income was always going to be there. I mean, she also took a pay cut, so I guess it was maybe less than half, but, yeah, but no, the reality is I have to thank you guys, because you talk about artistic finance and you recommend my show, and you're so nice about it. But I will say that while I started it during pandemic, that was a really hard time for me and for a lot of freelancers. And I actually talked minimally about COVID. I talked about freelancing. I talked about a career in the arts. But I avoided the topic because it was so sensitive and so raw. We actually really don't talk about it on the show a lot. So actually, this is the most I've talked about COVID on a podcast ever.
Well, let's stop.
Can you talk a little bit about fees and where you're seeing that? You know, you were in that room with all the 12-year-olds when you were working on Fiddler on the Roof. Did you notice that fees are getting better? Or are fees getting worse?
I think fees are getting better. They're not getting markedly better, but people are asking for more. This group that's no 10 out of 12s. I can't think of a better group in existence, honestly. Something that's saying, like, let's just work humanely. So I think people are asking for money. I think it's more expected. I don't know that people are getting it. Like, even myself, you know, I'll ask for a higher fee, and I sometimes get it. Like, I've gotten it more post-COVID than I got previous, but I don't know if that's because I just won't back down. I don't know if that's because there's a lot of work and I can just move on to something else and say no. Like, these days, and maybe this is why I was talking about that answer earlier of saying no anytime you want. Because the reality is, it's like I care more about what I'm doing now and where I'm putting my time and energy. So I think fees are rising, but I wouldn't say a ton. I like at LDI, Jen Shriver was on our panel, and she said, you know, an off-Broadway show pays roughly $5,000, and a regional is maybe a little bit more than that. And it's like that hasn't really changed. So pre-pandemic to post-pandemic, it's not much difference. Maybe the tech schedule is a little different. Maybe the designer can get, you know, the associate or the assistant to do more work and be in the space less. So stuff like that is making the fees seem a little bit better. So that's all improving, but I don't think the actual money is improving. But I will say that hourly wages across the board for all, you know, little producing companies is going up. People are trying to pay electricians better. You know, off-Broadway electrics rates was like $25 an hour. Like for my 10 years in New York, that's sort of like what the off-Broadway, and everyone would complain about it. But since COVID, that's sort of gone up to $35. I've even seen crews getting $45 or $50 an hour. So that is good. Those budgets are increasing. So yeah. So again, it's like it's sort of the same as it always has been, but people are expecting people to ask for more, and people are on the producing side are a little more willing to give a little bit because they just want to commit to all those things that happened during pandemic of we're working ourselves to the bone, we're working to ourselves to death for what? And the reality is, okay, we can do a little bit better. So I think things are improving and getting better, and I do think that's sustainable because
that was my question. Can we make that life? Sustainable is the word, or realistic. I'm trying to do that for my students, give them enough tools that they can have a sustainable career in what they love. Can the freelance life that's specifically in theater only ever become a sustainable career? I asked that rhetorically, you know.
Oh, I have an answer.
Good. Let's hear it.
I don't think it is sustainable. I think it's sustainable for a select few people who really want that. But I don't see, it's just a fact, period, that you can't have a life as a theater designer or a regional theater designer. You have to get to Broadway. You have to get some sort of commercial thing. You have to do some sort of trade shows that pays money. You can't make a living in theater, and you can't do it long term.
Can I drill on that a little bit? Is it because the money isn't there, which gets to one of Steve's questions, or because that's just how it's always been and we're going to keep it that way?
I think it's partially that the money is not there. In fact, I'd say that's the majority of it, because it's not that these theaters don't want to pay a better wage, but it's just you. And here's the reality is theaters don't make their money. Like, they don't make a profit, so they have to rely on donors. I think we've had a couple episodes on this, and it's sort of like nonprofit theaters rely 50% on ticket sales and 50% on donations
And merchandise.
yeah, and things like that. So it's a huge undertaking that for them to turn a profit, and they can only do it with donations. They can't do it with ticket sales. So
Because we don't have a national theater, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And even if, again, going back to Christmas Carol, it's like even with government help during pandemic, that was this special moment in our country, you know, where we actually did give some funding to the arts. It still wasn't enough. It still wasn't a lot. So yeah, I don't think as a designer that you can have a healthy, fulfilling life as a theater designer without doing other things, which is always how it's been.
I think that's a conclusion that needs to be broadcast, because I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Well, that's a hard message, Ethan.
It is.
Maybe you've got the answer. And that's a hard message to deliver in the college classroom.
It is.
Because, I mean, you know, you've been there, and there are students who say, I am going to be a dance designer. I am going to be a Shakespeare designer. You know, and I look at them and say, it's like you're going to have a lawn service, but you're only going to work with fescue. That idea that I don't want to do opera, I don't want to do a runway show, I don't want to do a Mary Kay industrial. It is, not everybody, but a lot of students come to our profession with a very naive and it's kind of sweet, but they come to this like, I'm only going to do musicals and I'll never do anything else. They just don't realize what building a career is.
Well, maybe we have to be cruel to be kind and tell them the truth.
I think you do. And the reality is you don't have to. You could not tell them this. They'll learn it on their own. And some will learn it sooner than others. But I will say that it is a mindset shift for everyone as well, because I was observing on the USA 829 lighting design exam a couple months ago. And one of the questions is, why do you want to be in the union and what is your career going to look like? And the answer that virtually everybody gives is, oh, you know, I'd love to do regional theater and I want to do this and that. And as soon as the exam is over, one of the comments always behind, you know, talking about them is that they'll learn soon enough that theater isn't sustainable. Like that's not going to be their main, that what they think or the answer they expect everybody, you know, that everyone's giving is not the reality. And yeah, I actually do think that does need to be broadcast, because it's a fact. You know, it's very, very, very few designers who work in theater. And even I myself fall prone to this, where I say, oh, I'm a theater designer and I list all my theater credits and my designs. But the reality is where I'm making my money is going to do TV, going to do industrial things. Things that aren't theater is how I make money. And then I go do the theater, but then I say I'm a theatrical lighting designer. And so...
Well, back in the day, I was doing something with Theone Aldridge, and she, just in casual conversation, said people have no idea how many uniforms I design for cruise boats or hotels, or how much fashion work I do. They think all I do is theater or all I do is dance. And, you know, she rattled off 20 or 30 things that were very prestigious, but if you would never consider that that's part of her world too. But she encompassed the entire world of clothing, not just a Broadway show.
Yeah. Well, even I was working with John Lee Beatty last year, archiving all his sketches for the New York Public Library. And, you know, at one point I said, oh, I'm going off to Forestburg, and I was getting paid $1,000 to do this design. And so I sort of like was very sheepish about it. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm getting paid $1,000. Like, you know, nothing like a John Lee Beatty fee. And he just point blank, he said, who are you kidding? You know, it's like he's had Chicago on Broadway for 25 years. He has all these big shows, you know, he's a legend, done over 100 Broadway shows. But the reality is, you know, he just did a show at the Irish Rep, and there historically, I don't know what his fee was, but it was a couple $1,000s. And the reality is like, yeah, if you want to work in theater, if you want to do these things, you're only going to get paid so much. You know, like Jen Shriver is at the top of her game. She's on Broadway. She's doing all the things right now. And she's still getting paid $5,000 to maybe $8,000 for a regional production. And $8,000 would be a good regional, you know. Right. So, and that's the reality.
Yeah, and if you broke it down to hours, it's kind of shocking, right? To hours spent versus the fee.
We do go into that at our LDI episode, which we released yesterday on Artistic Finance, the podcast feed. But she does break it down, and she talks about how her associates and assistants are making more than her, because with associates and assistants, you can really concretely break it down into, look, you're expecting them to be in the theater this many hours, and you're expecting them to draft for this many hours. That's coming out to $5 an hour or $3 an hour. And so she is able to do that. And a tip for anyone. So Jen, she will, when talking with producers, she will take the theater's statement on equity, inclusion, on doing better after post-pandemic, and she will send that along with her email and say, look, we're trying just to get the associates to $15 an hour, and you guys have committed to this as an organization, you know, please help us out. And that is, and that's tough. That's tough for her to do, but it's also just reality, and it's working. So,
you know, on the other side of the coin, the best training you could get to work in all those other fields is the theater. So there's a value in training it and getting the experience in it, but you can't stay locked into it only.
Yeah. And I'm going to be optimistic too, because I recently lit a college production, which I've actually never done in 10 years of freelancing. I've never done this. So I was on this college campus, and the students are so good. And I was looking at them thinking like, I wish I were this good, or I wish I had this head on my shoulders when I was an undergrad. I don't know what was going on, but they know, like, not all of them actually are expecting to go into theater, or they already want to do something else that's, you know, unrelated. There's already, you know, there's plenty of work to go around. But I think students now understand that already going out of the gate. So I don't know whether it's professors like you teaching the correct thing and letting them know what's going on. But a lot of them are not expecting to move to New York, and they don't want to move to New York. And the reality is, in today's day and age, there's so much work, there's so much content being created that you don't need to move to New York. Even though obviously if you do want to get to Broadway, et cetera, yes, go there, go to the big cities, but you don't need to, and students aren't expecting to. And so that gives me hope, because it's like, oh, they already are not setting their hat on Broadway.
It's a good point. The statistics show, or the data shows right now, that generation, I just finished an interesting book about somebody who has studied this subject. They will change careers or jobs every 5 years. And not just jobs, they may change industries every 5 years. So we sort of have to, so it's incumbent upon us in the academy to kind of bring the truth to them as soon as possible, I think, like you say. Okay, let's ask this really important question. Having had all the Lumen Brothers as guests on Artistic Finance, who was the best episode?
All right, I love this question. And I will say, yes, you have all been on. I have had all the original Lumen Brothers.
It was Amy Deluxe, and that was your best episode.
Amy Deluxe.
Amy Deluxe.
No, you guys were all good. And I actually want to say, I want to give a shout out to David, because David always says, yeah, I was on Artistic Finance. Don't listen to my episode.
But do the opposite.
But I got to say, you all brought something to the table. And David, there was something that you taught me on your episode, which was about low-cost hedge funds. Because the common knowledge is, you know, invest in ETFs, because ETFs have low expense ratios. And so that's going to take less of a fee, less of your money over the years. And you actually taught me that there are hedge funds that have very low costs, and some of them are lower cost than some of the ETFs out there. So
See that, David? You do know a few things.
Yeah, exactly.
By accident, I sort of,
He was being very self-deprecating, but he's got some good financial brain up there.
Except when it comes to buying Tesla and selling it. So that's all another
Well, okay, all right. Maybe I'll delete that part of the episode. But Stan, you came on and you talked about compound interest. And that is a repeating theme. And that is such an important thing that I honestly need to mention it every single episode because it's such an important concept to start saving, keep investing, and let it grow because it's just sort of like a miracle thing. And it
is a miracle thing.
You really hammered it and explained it really well. So your episode was great on that. And actually, Steve and Stan, I think David doesn't make the cut here, but all three of us have something in common here that I learned from having you guys on the show. And that is that we all subscribed to Money Magazine at some point in our life.
Yes, we did. Yes, right.
So David, we'll send you a subscription. But actually, Steve, you mentioned Amy Deluxe, and I actually do want to say that I heard Amy Deluxe on Light Talk, and I thought the episode was so good that I reached out to her and I said, "Will you come on Artistic Finance?"
Did you see her van at LDI? It was the white one with a dent in the passenger side door.
Okay, so actually there was two. So LDI was so good this year, but there were two big disappointments. One was that Steve wasn't a part of Light Talk. That was sad.
That's right.
The other part was that Amy's van was not there because she's been working so much. She had to fly here, fly there, and she didn't have time to get the van there. Yeah.
I was looking for it on Saturday night. I couldn't find it. That's why.
Gonna have to give her a wag of the finger.
Oh my God.
I was looking for that because there was a party in that van. There was going to be a party, but not anymore, I guess. I guess that never happened.
That was the first question I asked was, "Where's the van?" She said, "Oh,
Where's
sorry,
the
no
van?"
no van."
Hey, Ethan, thank you so much for being on the show today. This is a real kick. We could talk for another hour, but
we could. This could go on a long time.
Listeners would say, enough of this. I'm going to listen to some music.
No, I gotta say thank you for having me because your guys' show is so good, and you don't say it enough, but you guys are the #1 lighting podcast in the world.
Well, at least in Long Beach, Gainesville, and Dallas,
and the Faroe Islands.
There's not a lighting podcast out there that is more popular or better than your guys's, and I don't even know if you guys realize it, but you guys are so funny. You're always laughing. It's such a good show, and you have such a community. I mean, as I saw at LDI this year, because it was double the size of last year's sad little post-COVID LDI
in a tiny little room.
It was a tiny little room, but it was jam-packed. It was people everywhere. Everyone was so happy to be there. It was such a good episode, and you guys are just doing great work. And also from my recent college show experience, I have to say that as lighting professors, you guys are incredible. All three of you care so much about your students and you're doing so much. And Light Talk is a result of that, of like the value that you're bringing to the community and to educators across the nation, across the world. You guys are three of the best lighting design professors in existence. And so I got to commend you guys for that and for Light Talk. You guys are doing a great job.
You're still not getting a fez.
No, you're not getting a fez. But you know something? Listen, guys, I found 6 fezzes. You remember the fezzes I lost?
Yes, you found them.
Found them. I got 6 more fezzes.
Send Ethan a fez.
You're going to get a fez for saying all that, man.
Awesome. Amazing.
All right. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to the podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any of these statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you are foolish enough to decide to litigate us, the Snoot Group, with the legal team of Sparks, Burnout, and Chase, will defend us until all of our Roth IRA funds are depleted.
And if you listened to our episode last week, you know you don't want to screw around with Snoot. That's all I have to say.
Amen.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Gainesville, and Manhattan, the center of New York City, and the Republic of Texas.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk about more lighting shenanigans and serve you much more of our casserole of nonsense.
We are the Light Talkers, and we are broadcasting questionable lumen and some good financial knowledge with a dose of humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Light Talk.